Nini everyone, Mary here again, and it is hot as balls. I live in Washington, so I guess I shouldn't be complaining, but it's like almost 90 degrees right now in the summer, and it's only June too. I mean, we don't usually expect this sort of kind of weather until like maybe July or August. Um, a good joke, because I've lived in Washington all my life, but a good joke I like to say to people who are not natives to Washington, 70s is warm, 80s is hot, 90s is a heat wave, and in the 100s it's an apocalypse. I'm sure folks in Arizona might have something to say about that, but hey. To each their own. I'm acclimated to this climate, and I do not do well in heat. But anyway, I guess this is more just of an update video about what's been going on, and maybe a little bit about some opinions I have. But anyway, um, I have been super busy with my job and extracurricular stuff. Um, I am thinking about joining the SCA because um, a friend of a friend, pretty much, is an SCA member. And I recently went to this one event called June Fair that's held in Port Gamble, Washington. When I went there the first time, when I just got there, just arrived, I was like, there is so much to take in. What do I do first? But I started, doing some, well, not research, but I did go to like a newcomers meeting, and I found out that they pretty much go from the 1650s back, which was really exciting to me because, obviously one of the biggest things I'm most into is ancient Egypt. So I'm like, well, maybe I could make Egyptian garb or do Egyptian weapons or fighting or, that sort of thing. And, according to the rules, I think so. So you never know. Might see a later video of me making or trying to make Egyptian clothing, and then going to an SCA event in Egyptian garb. Um, or maybe even doing Egyptian archery or something, because I bought a bow, but it's not an Egyptian bow. Um, but I want to try and start getting into archery or different things like that, because I saw that and I really liked that. Um, and there are guys who, oh my goodness, that makes me think of this one guy I saw at the event. He was wearing armor from the Ptolemaic era of Egypt. And I just started freaking out. It's like, my sister was there, my boyfriend was there. And I'm like, oh my god, that guy's wearing Egyptian armor. Ah! So, it might be something I do. I'm not sure yet. I'm not fully committed. But, yeah. I think it would be really cool. Because, for so much of the time, even with SCA people, it's a very people who are interested in medieval history, or there are guys who are interested in Greek history in that group. Um, but I don't know of a whole lot of people who are interested in like Egypt or anything like that. But maybe I could start a trend. I don't know. Another thing I wanted to add is I have misplaced my Egyptian herbal book, so we might have to wait for some more uh, Kemetic plant series until I find it, because it's a great resource if you've ever read the book. I really loved it when I read it, And I don't want to do the series without, at least consulting the book and trying to look up at least to what, people have said about a certain plant. So I guess, if there are anybody who is, if there's anyone who really, really likes that series, I remember the third one about frankincense and myrrh was really popular apparently. They might have to wait a little bit, and I apologize for that, but I'm a very disorganized person when it comes to my own personal belongings. So, if you want to berate me or something, go right ahead because I deserve it. Um, but another thing I wanted to talk about has been something that has been on my mind for the longest time. And I mean, it's, there has been some recent events, at least a few months back, about, there was a measles outbreak stemming from an exposure or a person who had measles in Disneyland, if I recall correctly. And I do also remember reading a recent article about a diphtheria case in Spain when it was previously eradicated. And this kind of leads into my next um, thought or contention or however about vaccines. And if you know me at all or have been familiar with the things that I do, um, or been on the Following the Sun forums or something, I am a bio major. I graduated from the University of Washington with a Bachelor's of Science in Biology. And, it's a subject that I hold very close, and it's a very near and dear subject to my heart. And while I did study, my big focus was plants and ecology, I also have a big, I wouldn't say love necessarily, for infectious diseases. Um, I guess it's a penchant or an interest. Whenever I remember when I was like around 14, I was learning about the Black Death in junior high school. And I was also reading The Stand by Stephen King in junior high at the very same time frame. And so I think that really set the tone for a lot of things in my life. Um, I really love post-apocalyptic fiction, which The Stand is post-apocalyptic fiction. I also really love learning about infectious diseases. The Stand has to do with, obviously the super flu, and then the Black Death, plague and everything like that. So that was kind of a uh, watershed time in my life. It kind of realized it's like, oh my God, I love learning about this stuff. Um, so I've always read and studied about health and infectious diseases, and that continued on into my college career because like in introductory biology, we had to learn a lot about viruses and the human body, and I also took a class on infectious diseases to fulfill some credits too, because it's like, hey, I love this stuff anyway. Why don't I take this class? So. Um, it's always been a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Um, but something that really irks me is, people who are anti-vaxxers or anti-vaccination. The anti-vaxxer is sort of a more of a slang term, but you see it a lot. And I understand the reticence of a lot of modern technology and a lot of the issues in big pharma or the pharmaceutical companies. Um, a lot of things are, I wouldn't say being pushed, but there are a lot of problems with our current health system as it is right now. I mean, you have a lot of doctors who are pill pushers. I experienced this myself with my mother because one of her doctors, when she had a stroke in 2009, And one of her doctors was, one of those pill pushers who would constantly prescribe her different types of medication. And it even eventually led her to having to go to the hospital because of all the drug interactions and different things that were going on at that time. And it was something that deeply angered me because, it's like my mother could have died because she went into sort of a hypoglycemic shock because of all the medications that this doctor had prescribed for her, because he had her on a bunch of diabetic medication and appetite suppressants and all sorts of things like that. I mean, he just overdrugged her the whole way, and it was a very dangerous situation. She had to go to the hospital because she went to hypoglycemic shock, and it was completely preventable if he had been more cautious in his prescriptions. So I understand that perspective. And, obviously, in a lot of cases, a lot of things are overdiagnosed and they prescribe, pills. There's a pill for every solution. But in the case of vaccines, this is something that has been readily proved to be effective and a boon for human society. Um, you know, um, Actually, I have a relative who had polio. He was born before the polio vaccine was invented, and he caught polio. And his leg is shorter than the other, and he was not allowed. He wasn't allowed to do a lot of things, like even um, when he was a younger person, they were telling him, well, all you can be is a dishwasher because of your disability. And people should get you should get sympathy from people and money from people. But he went on to be an engineer, which is very commendable. um, but even then, he had wanted to serve in the military, but he couldn't do it because he was disabled. And that was because of polio, and that was because he couldn't get the vaccine when he was younger, because it hadn't been invented yet. But being somebody who has researched infectious diseases and read about them a lot of the time, I know about all the horrible things that can happen to you when you catch a disease. And a lot of people are thinking, oh well, it's measles, oh well, it's chicken pox. Those are non-lethal diseases. It's like hundreds of thousands of people still die every year globally from measles. We haven't had any recent deaths here in the United States, but that's because we have, such a good healthcare system here. But at the same time, children in other disadvantaged areas like Africa and Asia and areas like that where they don't have the infrastructure, they die. And it's like, why would you deny them the vaccine that prevents them from getting sick in the first place because you're afraid of, whatever's, could be in the vaccine? And I had a debate, a debate. Oh, I thrashed this one woman on YouTube. Because that's what I do when I'm bored. Is that okay? Um, sometimes when I'm bored, well, I don't pick fights necessarily, but I say, hey, you're wrong because of reasons A, B, and C, and then usually that person embarrasses themselves because they start swearing at me or calling me racial slurs if I'm arguing about race. But I try and use objective sources and different things like that to try and prove them wrong and prove my position right because I'm bored. Is that a weird thing? Is that a weird thing? Do you guys think so? I don't know. But anyway, I was arguing this with this one woman about vaccines. And I totally lost my train of thought. Um, I was talking about measles and various other things. And it's like polio, smallpox. Well, smallpox was eradicated because of vaccines. The World Health Organization had a huge effort of vaccinating people around, known cases of smallpox, and they were able to absolutely eradicate the disease from the globe. There are only a few samples of viruses that are in Atlanta at the CDC and in Russia, and that's it. That's the only known sources of the virus right now because of vaccines. Or like in the case of polio, my uncle had polio when he was, way back in the 50s or 40s. Um, you know, they got rid of polio in the United States because of vaccines. Um, there was a recent case of diphtheria in Spain, and it was the first one in decades because they had vaccinated the population. But this one couple who did not vaccinate their children, one of their children got the diphtheria because they had not vaccinated. Or like even here where I live in this area, you have a lot of people in in King County or Vashon, or not Vashon, Bainbridge Island, or as some of us on the Kitsap Peninsula like to call, Brain Dead Island. You've had outbreaks of like whooping cough and stuff because, you have a bunch of these, yuppie people who say, oh, well, since, vaccines contain, all these sorts of chemicals and mercury and all this sort of stuff, I'm not going to vaccinate my kids. I'm going to be a smart person. And it's like, well, now your kid has measles or whooping cough or something like that. And, I don't feel sorry for these people in the least. They chose to not vaccinate their children. My parents chose to vaccinate me, and I'm perfectly healthy. Aside from, regular childhood illnesses, ear infections, and, stomach bugs and all that good stuff, I have been, a regular kid. I didn't get autism. I didn't, have any immunodeficiencies or immunodisorders or anything like that. I was perfectly regular, and, you know, I've been, a regular human being for the most part, even though I got the full schedule of vaccines. Which kind of ties into that one argument that I had with that one person on YouTube, because she's like, I had all these vaccines and then I got sick and this and that and the other thing and it was terrible and vaccines caused it all. I'm like, well, if you're gonna go by your own personal experience, I have my own personal experience. I was fine. Yeah. Because being a bio major, I don't go by personal anecdotes. You know, everybody's different. People have immunodeficiencies. People have allergies. Everybody's different. But the thing is, you look at a wider swath, a larger sample group, and you can see, say for certain circumstances, like if the person is like allergic to eggs, like with the flu vaccine or something, or they have a immunodeficiency where they can't have a virus, floating around in their bloodstream, even if it's a weakened one. Vaccines are largely safe. And, I've used my own research on this. I've looked up papers on this. And when I mean papers, I mean like, scientific papers. Scientific journals, and they release their own data about these sorts of things and their own conclusions and everything like that, and their methodology, all of that, all of that. And vaccines are largely safe. Vaccines aren't perfect, mind you. They're, generally about 95% effective. I mean, you will be largely safe from any given pathogen or anything like that if you have the vaccine. There may be a slight chance you might catch it because vaccines aren't perfect. Your immune system, might still not recognize the virus or bacteria or pathogen or whatever, and you might still get sick. It's, maybe about a 5% chance at the most. But the big thing about vaccines is we rely on herd immunity to protect us from all these pathogens. When everybody around is protected by their immunity, it bolsters the whole population. You need about 95% of the population to be immunized against any given pathogen in order to protect that population against the disease. So if we, immunize 95% of the population against polio, that will make it so that, if there's a person who comes in from the country who has polio or who has been exposed to polio, most of the people around them, or like pretty much all those people around them, they won't catch it. There's a 95% chance they won't catch it. And then the other and then everybody else around them won't catch it. And then everybody else around them won't catch it because they're all immunized. But when you bring in somebody like with measles from another country or something like that, and they have that disease, or they've been exposed or something like that, if there's people around them who have not been vaccinated, they don't have any immunity against this particular disease, they'll catch it and then they'll spread it to anybody who else that either hasn't had a vaccine, or maybe there's a slight chance they may spread it to somebody who has had the vaccine, and it just is that 5% chance that they catch it. So that's a huge problem here. It also blows my mind too when some people are like, well, it's somebody else who brought it into the country. It's like, well, sure, it could be anybody who brought it. I mean, it's sort of like an anti-immigrant bias against people, who come from other countries. It's like, well, you're bringing in all this stuff. We wouldn't have this problem if you weren't here. What about people who travel? A lot of times when you travel, you get vaccines, like against yellow fever or different things like that, in order to prevent you from bringing shit home. What about those people? I mean, they're citizens. People don't think this sort of thing through. And I wanted to, talk about this sort of thing because, as a lot of people might know, I'm a devotee of Sekhmet. She called me. She's my, I guess, matron goddess. And Sekhmet is a deity who is a lady of plagues, She, well, it was often rumored that, a lot of her statues were anointed with anthrax to keep people from touching them, which I thought was like, oh my God, that's crazy and cool at the same time, because it's like almost like germ warfare way back in ancient times. If you know anything about history, the earliest record of germ warfare I can or known definite germ warfare I can recall is the siege on Kaffa, which happened in like the 1300s, before the Great Black Death of Europe. Because they were checking bodies of plague victims over the walls to try and infect the city with plague. But anyway, so it's like, if they anointed statues of Sekhmet with anthrax, would that not be an example of biological warfare against people who might try and defile her statues? But Sekhmet was also a goddess of healing as well. Her priests were considered to be physicians, and if she can hurt you with plagues, she can also heal you by taking away that plague. So, one of her titles is the Great One of Healing. And personally, I believe that vaccines are a gift from Sekhmet, because she is the Lady of Plagues. She has her 7 arrows of the year. These sorts of things are things she can attack us with. Viruses and pathogens and bacteria and parasites even, maybe. And yet there's this thing out here that exists that derives from those very things, the viruses and bacteria and all of that, that we can use to heal ourselves, or not really heal ourselves necessarily, but prevent illness from ever happening, derived from those very pathogens. So I think it's a gift from Sekhmet. She gives us this ability to attenuate viruses, weaken pathogens, and strengthen our immune systems. People don't use it because they're like, oh, well, there's aluminum and formaldehyde and mercury. There's always a reason why these things are here in the vaccines. They don't add things to harm people, or or these things are unnecessary or anything like that. I mean, formaldehyde is, it's a very small amount of formaldehyde, and it's used as a preservative, or aluminum is an adjuvant, because it jumpstarts your immune system to try and fight the virus. It gives you a stronger immune response, and other things too. But it's not like a huge conspiracy to try and kill people or something like that. I mean, there's all these conspiracy theories about it, and it's like, if they're trying to hurt people or cull the population, they're doing a terrible job of it, because right now there's 7 billion people on this earth right now, and it's still growing, you know. But yeah, going back to the whole vaccines as Sekhmet's gift, she's giving us these weakened pathogens so that our immune systems can fight these illnesses that are within this world. And when you decide that you're not going to vaccinate your kids, it feels like, to me at least, because I understand, what these diseases are and what they do to you, and I understand, what vaccines are and what they do to you, then, would you rather have the disease, or would you rather take the risk from the vaccine? And for a lot of people, they think the vaccine is more horrible than the disease itself, and that is clearly not true. I mean, vaccines clearly do not cause autism, as many people claim. There was a Dr. Andrew Wakefield, and he was the one who started the whole vaccines cause autism thing. He had his medical license revoked because they found the paper that he did saying that virus or vaccines were causing autism. He had bad data, falsified data, and so they took his medical license away. He's a fraud. And then, all the preservatives and stuff and vaccines. I mean, even, with that formaldehyde, it's a carcinogen. I know that. But at the same time, it's a very, very small amount, and you're being exposed to tons more chemicals in your food and your environment, and like your soaps and shampoos and your bed, your stuffed toys, if you're a kid, and all sorts of things. You're being bombarded with chemicals every day. What is, this vaccine, compared to, your food? Especially, like, if it's an organophosphate that they use to as a pesticide or something like that. I mean, people don't really think about the risks involved with what they're doing compared to the risks involved in what they don't do. Because if you don't take the vaccine, what's going to happen? You could catch measles. That can be bad. You know, it's not as bad as, you know, maybe say in Africa where you can't get the health care that you need if you have any complications from that virus. But, you know, smallpox still exists. Smallpox is still around, even though no person is infected with it. There's still stores of it in Russia. There's still stores of it in Atlanta, Georgia. And there has always been speculation that terrorists have gotten smallpox, either in the 70s or from the facilities in Russia that are not as well guarded. What if this virus comes back again? What if any of these diseases come back again? You know, my uncle has one leg shorter than the other, and he was lucky. Have you ever heard of the iron lung? I encourage everyone to look that up. Polio is not a laughing matter. It still exists in a lot of areas in the world. It's not here in the United States, but, you know, all things considered, it can come back. And you could have a child and back up in the iron lung because the polio virus damages your nerves. It makes these children unable to breathe. So they have to be put in lungs, iron lungs, that breathe for them. And some of them never made it out. Well, there's diphtheria. So a lot of kids died because they couldn't get the antitoxin. They got sick. Measles, chickenpox, hepatitis. All sorts of horrible diseases that are preventable by vaccines. These horrible, horrible diseases. These arrows of Sekhmet. And people think it's better than the vaccine. I am not a nice person when it comes to people who are anti-vaxxers. I'm not. You know, if you're an anti-vaxxer, you're not my friend. I don't want to associate with you. Because of the suffering. The amount of suffering you think is better than, you know, some tiny pinprick. So, you know, maybe it's Mother Sekhmet coming through. But I don't have any sympathy for anti-vaxxers. So, if you want to talk about it or anything else that I mentioned in this video, go for it. I am willing to listen. But if you're an anti-vaxxer, don't prepare for mean me, because I can be very mean when it comes to that sort of thing. So be prepared. Thank you, Sekhmet.